I remember the exact moment my world cracked open. It was not when I read the messages or saw the proof. It was the moment I looked at my wife and chose to forgive her. I told myself love meant staying. I told myself forgiveness was strength. She cried, she promised, she swore it would never happen again. I believed her, because after 15 years of marriage, I wanted to believe that love could survive betrayal. Weeks passed and everything felt strangely calm. Too calm. She smiled more, spoke softly, and acted like our marriage had been reborn. But deep inside, something felt wrong. One night, she said something that froze my blood. Not an apology, not regret, but a sentence so cold it made me question everything I thought forgiveness meant. In that moment, I realized the betrayal was never really over. It was evolving, and I was about to learn the most painful lesson of my life. But forgiveness was only the beginning of my pain, because what she did after I forgave her was far worse than the cheating itself. Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for being here and sharing a moment of your life with me. Before we begin, take a second and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today and how old are you? I truly love reading your stories and knowing this journey connects us across different places and ages. I hope your day has been peaceful so far, and if it has not, I hope this story gives you comfort, reflection, or strength. If you enjoy deep emotional stories about love, marriage, and real-life lessons, please support this channel by liking the video and subscribing. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts around the world. Now let me tell you how forgiving her became the biggest mistake I never expected. When I first met her, love felt simple and honest. We were young, hopeful, and convinced that loyalty was something that came naturally when two people truly cared for each other. Our early years were filled with laughter, small arguments that ended in apologies and dreams about growing old together. I believed marriage was a safe place, a promise that protected two hearts from the chaos of the world outside. As the years passed, life slowly changed us. Responsibilities grew heavier, conversations became shorter, and silence sometimes replaced laughter. Still, I never doubted her faithfulness. I trusted her completely, the way a man trusts the ground beneath his feet. Even when work kept us busy and stress followed us, I believed our bond was unbreakable. Friends would joke about temptation and modern relationships, but I always smiled with confidence. I thought betrayal was something that happened to other people, to broken marriages and careless hearts. Not to us, not to the woman who once held my hand and promised forever. I never imagined how fragile trust truly was until it shattered in my hands. Looking back now, there were signs I ignored. Late nights, distracted smiles, moments when her eyes felt distant. But love can make you blind, and hope can silence doubt. I chose to believe in the version of our marriage that existed in my memories, not the reality slowly unfolding in front of me.
The truth did not arrive with shouting or dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, through a message I was never meant to see. Words filled with intimacy that were not meant for me. My hands shook as I read them, my heart pounding as if it was trying to escape my chest. In that moment, my entire history with her felt rewritten.
When I confronted her, she did not deny it. She cried, her voice breaking as she tried to explain something that had no explanation. She said it was a mistake. She said it meant nothing. I listened, frozen between anger and disbelief, trying to recognize the woman standing in front of me.
I remember asking a simple question. Why? She had no real answer, just excuses wrapped in regret. The room felt heavy, as if the air itself carried the weight of her betrayal. Every word she spoke cut deeper, not because it was cruel, but because it sounded empty. That night I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying memories, searching for the exact moment everything went wrong. I felt humiliated, angry, and broken. Yet, beneath all that pain, there was still love. And love can make a man do things that logic never would.
Forgiveness did not come easily. It was a battle between pride and fear. Fear of losing her, fear of starting over, fear of admitting that the life I built was falling apart. I told myself that everyone makes mistakes, and that love means giving second chances, even when it hurts. I sat across from her and said the words out loud, "I forgive you." Her eyes filled with tears and she reached for my hands. She promised transparency. She promised honesty. She promised she would do anything to rebuild my trust. In that moment, I wanted to believe her more than anything. For a while, it felt like things were improving. She became more attentive. She checked in often. She spoke about our future with renewed enthusiasm. Friends told me I was strong for staying. They said forgiveness was rare and admirable. I held on to those words like a shield against my doubts.
But deep inside, something felt unsettled. Trust, once broken, does not heal quietly. It lingers, whispering questions in the silence. I ignored that voice, convincing myself that pain was part of the healing process. I had no idea that the worst betrayal was still ahead of me.
After I forgave her, I expected humility and patience. Instead, something subtle began to change. Her tone grew firmer, her opinions sharper, and her patience with me thinner. It confused me. I was the one who was hurt, yet somehow I felt like I was becoming the problem. I told myself healing looks different for everyone. She started spending more time alone, claiming she needed space to process her guilt. I respected that, even when it hurt. I believed giving her freedom showed trust. But every hour she stayed distant felt like another crack in the fragile bridge we were trying to rebuild together. Sometimes I would ask if she was okay, and she would respond with frustration. She said I was holding the past over her head. She said forgiveness meant moving on completely. I stayed quiet, swallowing my feelings, afraid that speaking up would push her further away. I began questioning myself. Was I being unreasonable? Was my pain unfair? I had forgiven her, yet I felt more alone than ever. Love had turned into silence, and silence had become heavier than any argument we ever had. Slowly, the narrative shifted. She spoke as if my struggle to trust her was the real betrayal. She reminded me constantly that she had apologized, that she had cried, that she had changed. Each time I expressed discomfort, she reacted defensively, making me feel guilty for not healing fast enough. One evening, she looked at me and said something I will never forget. She said, "I cannot live my life being punished forever." Her words struck me deeply. I realized then that my pain had become an inconvenience to her, not something she wanted to understand. I stopped sharing my feelings. I stopped asking questions. I learned to suffer quietly because conflict felt more dangerous than loneliness. I convinced myself that peace, even if false, was better than losing her completely. But silence does not erase pain. It stores it. Every unspoken thought, every swallowed emotion built pressure inside me. I smiled on the outside while something inside me slowly collapsed. The sentence that changed everything came during an ordinary conversation. We were sitting at the kitchen table talking about the future. Suddenly she looked at me calmly and said she was not sure she would choose me again if given the chance. Her voice was steady, almost indifferent.
I felt my chest tighten. I asked her what she meant. She shrugged and said, "People grow. People change." She said forgiveness did not guarantee love would return the same way. In that moment, I realized my forgiveness had not restored our marriage. It had given her permission to detach.
I sat there in silence, staring at the woman I once trusted with my entire life. I had forgiven her betrayal, yet she was now questioning our entire history. The pain was sharper than discovering the affair itself, because this time it felt deliberate. That night I understood something painful. Cheating had broken my trust, but emotional abandonment was destroying my soul, and I was still holding on to someone who was already letting go. From that moment on, I felt like a guest in my own marriage. Conversations became practical and empty, focused only on schedules and responsibilities. She no longer asked how my day was or how I felt. Her presence was there, but her heart was somewhere else, and I could feel it in every silent room we shared. I tried to reconnect in small ways. I suggested walks, dinners, even therapy. She agreed half-heartedly, as if participating out of obligation rather than desire. Each rejection was subtle, but together they formed a clear message. I was no longer someone she was fighting for. At night, I lay beside her, staring into the darkness. wondering when love had turned into distance. I questioned my worth, my efforts, and my identity as a husband. Betrayal had already wounded me, but this quiet indifference was slowly erasing me. I realized something terrifying. I was more afraid of being alone than she was, and that imbalance gave her power I never intended to give away. Small signs began appearing again. Her phone was always face down. Passwords changed. She stepped outside to take calls. Each detail felt familiar, like a nightmare repeating itself. I told myself I was being paranoid, that trauma can distort perception, but my intuition refused to stay silent. One evening I asked her directly if there was someone else. She laughed softly and accused me of projecting my fear. She said I was sabotaging our healing. Her words were calm, but her eyes avoided mine. That avoidance told me more than her denial ever could. I hated myself for doubting her again, but I hated myself more for ignoring the truth before. Trust once broken leaves scars that react to pain before the mind does. My heart already knew what I was afraid to confirm. I started paying attention not out of suspicion but out of survival. I needed clarity even if it destroyed me. Living in uncertainty was becoming unbearable. The second discovery was not dramatic. It was quiet and devastating. I found messages that were not explicitly romantic, but emotionally intimate. Inside jokes, daily check-ins, complaints about me. She was building a connection while slowly dismantling our marriage. This time, I did not confront her immediately. I felt numb, as if my body was protecting me from feeling everything at once. I realized then that cheating is not always physical. Sometimes the deepest betrayal is choosing someone else emotionally while still sleeping beside your spouse. I thought forgiveness would save us. Instead, it taught her that my boundaries were flexible. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. I had given her grace, and she had used it as freedom to walk further away from me. Sitting alone that night, I finally understood the title of my pain. I forgave her cheating, but what she did next hurt even more. I finally confronted her again, not with anger, but with exhaustion. I told her I knew about the messages, about the emotional closeness she shared with someone else. She listened quietly, without tears this time. That silence told me everything I needed to know. There was no shock, no remorse, only resignation. She said she never meant to hurt me. She said she felt lonely even before the first affair. Hearing that felt like being blamed for a wound she caused. I realized then how easily people rewrite history to justify their choices, even when those choices destroy someone who loved them deeply. I asked her if she still loved me. She hesitated, then said she cared about me, but love felt different now. That pause was louder than any confession. It was the moment I understood that I was fighting alone for a marriage that required two hearts. When the conversation ended, nothing was resolved, but something inside me broke completely. The hope I had protected for so long finally collapsed under the weight of reality. In the days that followed, I reflected on everything I had endured. I saw how often I had minimized my pain to preserve peace, how I had sacrificed my dignity to avoid abandonment. Forgiveness had turned into self-betrayal, and that realization was painful but necessary. I stopped asking her to choose me. I stopped seeking reassurance from someone who no longer valued my presence. Instead, I began asking myself why I had accepted so little from someone who once promised me everything. There is a quiet strength that comes from acceptance, not acceptance of what was done to you, but acceptance of what you deserve. I deserved honesty. I deserved effort. I deserved love that did not require me to disappear. For the first time in months, I felt clarity. Pain was still there, but confusion was gone, and that clarity became the foundation for my next decision. One morning, I told her I needed space. Not to punish her, but to save myself. She seemed relieved rather than afraid, and that reaction confirmed everything I had already accepted. Sometimes answers come not from words, but from emotional distance. I moved into a small apartment with nothing but essentials. The silence there felt different. It was not lonely. It was peaceful. For the first time, my thoughts were my own, not shaped by fear or constant disappointment. I began rebuilding myself slowly. Long walks, honest conversations with friends, nights spent reflecting instead of questioning my worth. Healing was not fast, but it was real, because it was finally centered on me. Letting go did not mean I failed. It meant I finally chose myself. And that choice changed everything. Time away from her gave me something I had not felt in years: perspective. Without constant tension, I could finally hear my own thoughts clearly. I began to see how deeply the relationship had drained me, how much of myself I had slowly abandoned just to keep someone else comfortable. I noticed small changes within myself. I slept better. I breathed deeper. I smiled without forcing it. Healing was not dramatic or emotional. It was quiet, steady, and deeply personal. For the first time, I felt present in my own life again. Friends told me I looked lighter. They said my eyes no longer carried the same sadness. I realized then how visible my pain had been, even when I thought I was hiding it well. Love should not make you disappear, and I had nearly vanished. In that clarity, I stopped romanticizing the past. I accepted it for what it was, a chapter that shaped me but no longer defined me. She started reaching out more often, messages asking how I was doing, calls filled with hesitation. I could sense uncertainty in her voice, something I had not heard before. Distance had changed the balance between us. One day she admitted she felt lost without me. She said the silence scared her. Hearing that no longer gave me comfort. It gave me clarity. I realized how often she only felt my value once I stopped offering it freely. She spoke about regret, about confusion, about not knowing what she wanted. I listened calmly, without interruption. Not because I no longer cared, but because I no longer needed to convince her of my worth. In that moment, I understood something powerful. Love cannot survive where respect is absent, and respect begins with how we treat ourselves. When she asked if there was still a chance for us, I did not answer immediately. I thought about everything I had endured, every moment I had silenced myself to keep her close. I realized love should not require constant self-sacrifice. I told her I needed honesty, consistency, and effort, not promises, not apologies, real change. She listened, but I could tell she was unsure. That uncertainty was my answer. Walking away was not easy, but it was necessary. I was no longer afraid of loneliness because I had learned that staying in emotional neglect was far more damaging. That decision did not end my story. It began a new one built on self-respect, clarity, and quiet strength. Letting go did not happen overnight. There were mornings I woke up reaching for my phone, wanting to hear her voice. Old habits linger even after love fades. But instead of fighting those moments, I allowed myself to feel them without judgment, knowing that healing requires honesty with yourself. I stopped blaming myself for the failure of the marriage. Two people create distance even when only one betrays. Accepting that truth freed me from carrying guilt that was never mine to begin with. Forgiveness, I learned, is not about excusing behavior, but about releasing control over your peace. Slowly, happiness returned in unexpected ways. A quiet cup of coffee, a walk at sunset, laughter with friends who reminded me who I was before pain reshaped me. I realized joy does not need permission from the past. I was no longer surviving. I was living again on my own terms without fear or constant emotional negotiation. Betrayal teaches lessons that comfort never will. It reveals boundaries, values, and the strength you never knew you had. I learned that love without respect slowly destroys the soul, and loyalty means nothing when it is one-sided. Forgiving someone does not obligate you to stay. That truth took me years to understand. Compassion should never come at the cost of your dignity. Real love does not demand silence or self-erasure. I stopped seeing myself as a victim. I saw myself as someone who chose growth over bitterness. Pain shaped me, but it did not define my future. And that distinction changed everything. If you are listening to this and feeling trapped in emotional betrayal, know this. You are not weak for caring. You are strong for recognizing when care is no longer returned. Many people stay in broken relationships because they fear starting over. I did too. But starting over does not mean starting from nothing. It means starting with wisdom, clarity, and self-respect earned through experience. Love should feel safe, not confusing. It should bring peace, not constant doubt. If someone hurts you and then continues to hurt you after forgiveness, that is not healing. That is a warning. You deserve a love that chooses you when it is difficult, not only when it is convenient. Never allow someone to rewrite your worth based on their inability to commit. My story is not about loss. It is about awakening. And sometimes awakening comes disguised as heartbreak. Looking back now, I no longer feel anger when I think of her. I feel understanding. Not understanding that excuses betrayal, but understanding that people act from their own unresolved wounds. That realization allowed me to finally release resentment that had been weighing on my heart. I accepted that the version of her I loved no longer existed. Holding on to memories was keeping me anchored to pain. Letting go was not forgetting. It was choosing peace over nostalgia, truth over illusion. I forgave her again, but this time for my own healing. Not to reopen doors, not to rebuild what was broken, but to free myself completely. That forgiveness felt lighter, cleaner, and final. Closure did not come from an apology. It came from clarity, and clarity gave me peace I had never known before. Today I live differently. I listen to my intuition. I honor my boundaries. I choose relationships that feel mutual, honest, and safe. I no longer chase love. I allow it to meet me where I stand. I am no longer afraid of loving again. But next time, love will not come from fear of being alone. It will come from wholeness, from a place where I know my value, regardless of who chooses to stay. Pain taught me what comfort never could, and for that I am grateful. Not because it hurt, but because it changed me into someone stronger, wiser, and more grounded.
Some endings are not failures. They are redirections toward a life you were always meant to live.
Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If this resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your experiences matter, and your voice might help someone else feel less alone. If you found meaning here, support the channel by liking the video and subscribing for more real-life stories about love, betrayal, healing, and growth. No matter where you are watching from, I hope your days ahead are filled with clarity, strength, and peace.